Davia. I'm so deeply sorry. I hope one day you can see I would never let this happen or do it on purpose. I wish I could remember what happened. I'm just so sorry. I'm heartbroken. I love Dom and Davion.
It didn't look like murder at first, just another late-night crash. Twisted metal, shattered glass, and silence where 3 young lives once existed. But beneath the wreckage, something far darker was waiting to surface. A teenage girl, a relationship filled with tension, and a split-second decision that would echo far beyond that road in Ohio. What unfolded wasn't just a tragedy, it became a case that divided opinions, raised unsettling questions, and left families searching for answers they may never find. And just when it seemed like the story had reached its end, a single missed moment in court may have sealed her fate forever. At first glance, McKenzie Sharilla looked like any other teenager, posting on TikTok, smiling in photos, living what seemed like a normal life. But behind those clips and snapshots, there was a relationship quietly unraveling. What appeared picture-perfect on the surface was, in reality, filled with tension, arguments, and emotional volatility that few people truly understood. Back in 2022, McKenzie was in a relationship with 20-year-old Dominic Russo. They had known each other for years, even living together at one point in a home owned by Dominic's family. To outsiders, they looked close, inseparable even. But according to family members, their relationship was anything but stable. Arguments were frequent, intense, and sometimes laced with threats. Their dynamic had become toxic, a cycle of breaking up and getting back together that only seemed to escalate over time. One recorded phone call, later used as evidence, revealed just how volatile things had become. The tone wasn't just emotional, it was confrontational, almost desperate. It painted a picture of 2 people trapped in a relationship that neither could fully walk away from, yet neither could manage in a healthy way. Then came the early hours of July 31st, 2022. What happened that night would change everything. McKenzie was behind the wheel of a car, with Dominic in the passenger seat, and their friend, DaVon Flanigan, also inside. At some point during that drive, something shifted. Surveillance footage would later show the vehicle accelerating, fast. Not just speeding, but pushing past 100 miles per hour. There was no indication of braking, no attempt to slow down. Just a straight, relentless surge forward, until the car slammed into a solid wall with devastating force. The impact was catastrophic. The vehicle was torn apart, literally split in 2. It didn't even look like a car anymore. When first responders finally arrived, hours after the crash had occurred, the scene was haunting. The silence, the stillness, the complete lack of movement inside the wreckage. It told its own story before anyone even said a word. Officers rushed in, trying to assess if anyone was still alive. But it quickly became clear, this wasn't a rescue, it was recovery. Dominic Russo and DaVon Flanigan didn't survive. McKenzie did. Despite the sheer violence of the crash, she was found alive and airlifted to a hospital with multiple serious injuries. It was nothing short of shocking, the kind of survival that almost feels impossible given the destruction left behind. But survival brought questions. From the very beginning, McKenzie's explanation remained consistent. She claimed she didn't remember what happened. According to her, she blacked out. The crash, she insisted, was nothing more than a tragic accident, something she couldn't control, something she couldn't even recall. But investigators weren't convinced, because the evidence didn't align with a sudden loss of consciousness. The footage showed acceleration, intentional, sustained acceleration, not the kind that happens by accident, not the kind that comes from someone unaware of what they're doing. And then there was what was found inside the vehicle. During the investigation, police recovered drug-related items from the wreckage, including a weed pen, a bong, and marijuana. While this didn't immediately prove intent, it added another layer to the narrative prosecutors were beginning to build. It raised questions about judgment, awareness, and what state McKenzie might have been in before the crash. Still, one of the most controversial aspects of the case wasn't just what happened during the crash, but what happened after. While recovering in the hospital, McKenzie appeared, at least on the surface, like someone grieving. She spoke as though she had lost people she loved. She described the situation as heartbreaking, tragic, and completely out of her control. To some, she seemed like another victim of that night, but prosecutors would later argue something very different. They pointed to behavior that, in their view, didn't reflect genuine remorse. Videos surfaced showing McKenzie attending a concert while still in a wheelchair. This was during the period when the investigation was ongoing, before she had even been formally charged. To the prosecution, this wasn't just surprising, it was disturbing. They argued it showed a disconnect, a lack of emotional weight for what had happened. And it didn't stop there. A classmate came forward with text messages that raised even more eyebrows. In those messages, McKenzie reportedly asked for photos of herself to be placed inside Dominic's casket at his funeral. Her reasoning? So that he could be with her forever. To some, it sounded like grief expressed in an unusual way. To others, it felt deeply unsettling. As investigators pieced everything together, the crash footage, the physical evidence, the relationship history, and her actions afterward, a clearer theory began to form. This wasn't just an accident, this was something far more deliberate. And by November 2022, that theory led to a decisive moment. McKenzie Sharilla was arrested and charged with aggravated murder. The arrest marked a turning point, but it was only the beginning of a courtroom battle that would ultimately decide whether this was a tragic accident or something far more intentional. By the time McKenzie Sharilla's case went to trial in 2023, the narrative had become sharply divided. On one side, the defense held firmly to a single claim. She didn't remember anything. According to them, this was a blackout, a moment of lost consciousness that led to an irreversible tragedy. No intent, no planning, no motive, just a devastating accident. On the other side, prosecutors built a case that told a completely different story. They argued that this wasn't about memory loss, it was about choice. They walked the court through the timeline, the toxic nature of McKenzie's relationship with Dominic, and the critical moments leading up to the crash. The most powerful piece of evidence remained the surveillance footage. It didn't show hesitation. It didn't show confusion. It showed acceleration, deliberate, sustained, and extreme. A car speeding past 100 miles per hour, with no signs of braking, heading straight into a wall. To the prosecution, that wasn't an accident. That was intent. Another major factor that shaped the trial was McKenzie's decision to waive her right to a jury. Instead of placing her fate in the hands of 12 jurors, she chose a bench trial, meaning a judge alone would decide the outcome. It was a strategic move, one that carries risks, especially in a case driven heavily by interpretation and intent. When the verdict came, it was decisive. The judge found McKenzie guilty on 12 counts, including multiple charges of murder, felonious assault, and aggravated vehicular homicide. It was a sweeping conviction that left very little room for ambiguity. The court had made its position clear. This was not seen as a tragic mistake, but as a criminal act with devastating consequences. Then came the sentencing. The courtroom was heavy with emotion. Families of the victims were present, carrying grief that had only deepened over time. When McKenzie was given the chance to speak, her words were filled with apology, but still rooted in the same claim she had made from the beginning. She said she didn't remember what happened. She insisted she would never have done this on purpose. She called Dominic her soulmate. She said she wished she could take everyone's pain away. But even in that moment, the divide remained. Because for many in that courtroom, the issue wasn't just what she said, it was what they believed. Her mother also spoke, defending her daughter and describing her as someone completely devastated by the loss. She painted a picture of grief, of a girl who spent months mourning, surrounded by memories of Dominic. But the judge interrupted at one point, making something unmistakably clear. The focus wasn't where it needed to be. 2 people were dead. And in the judge's eyes, that truth outweighed everything else. When the judge addressed McKenzie directly, the tone shifted from emotional to resolute. She stated plainly that there was only one person responsible for the pain in that room, and that person was McKenzie. Not the families, not circumstance, not fate. Her. The sentence handed down was 15 years to life in prison. It left open the possibility of parole, but also the very real chance that she could spend the rest of her life behind bars. At that point, the case seemed settled. But McKenzie's legal team wasn't done. They filed an appeal, aiming to challenge the conviction. Their argument centered on intent, claiming there wasn't enough evidence to prove she meant to kill anyone. If successful, it could have opened the door to a new trial, a second chance to reshape the narrative. But everything came down to timing. The appeal was filed 1 day late, just 1 day, and that single detail changed everything. The court rejected the appeal, not because of weak arguments or lack of merit, but because it missed the legal deadline. McKenzie's team tried to push back, even arguing that the extra day from a leap year should count in their favor. But the court didn't accept it. The decision stood: no appeal, no new trial, no second chance. Higher courts, including the state's Supreme Court, also declined to step in. With that, the legal path forward effectively closed. What remained was the sentence already in place, and the reality that McKenzie Sharilla's fate may have been sealed not just by her actions, but by a procedural mistake that couldn't be undone. Now, the future sits in uncertainty. With a sentence of 15 years to life, there is a possibility she could be considered for parole in her mid-30s. But that outcome is far from guaranteed. It will depend on decisions made years from now, by parole boards, by circumstances, and by how this case continues to be viewed over time. What isn't uncertain, though, is the impact. 3 families forever changed, 2 lives lost, and one decision that continues to spark debate. Was it truly an accident, or something far more deliberate? And maybe the most unsettling part of all is that depending on who you ask, the answer still isn't the same. If you made it this far, let me know your thoughts. Do you believe this was a tragic accident, or was there clear intent behind what happened that night? Drop your opinion in the comments below. And if you want more deep dives into cases like this, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow.